following the ideas that you're going to be studying for the next couple of days is absolutely incredible. I could do nothing but keep expressing great ideas when I talk about the good that can come to you. You can do anything you want. You can have anything you want by following these ideas. Now, I choose to believe that every one of you wants something. Way down deep inside of you is a dream. And every now and then that dream floats to the surface of your conscious mind. And when it does, you softly push it out and you say, I can't do that. Now, the truth is you can, you just don't know how.
Yeah, I know.
That's straight in your mind. I'm going to tell you, you must it out. Now, Vernon Howard one time pointed out in a magnificent book, Mystic Path to Cosmic Power, you cannot escape from prison if you don't know you're in one. You cannot escape.
Delikado yan, ano?
No, you're in one.
Oo.
Well, I think we're all in one to some degree. But that dream you've got that comes to your mind, I would suggest you look at it real carefully.
Yan yung mga sarado na yung isip.
Oo, na hindi nila alam na sarado yung isip nila.
Yun.
Mahirap nga yun.
Hindi na sila, sabi niya, pagtatagalugin yun. Hindi ka makakalaya hanggat hindi mo tinatanggap sa sarili mo or hindi mo alam sa sarili mo na prisoner ka.
Oo. Kasi sarado nga isip.
Kung saan wala kang self-awareness.
Oo.
I was given a cassette tape by a gentleman in a seminar that we were conducting a couple of years ago, and it was a copy of a speech made by a minister out of Minneapolis. And there were a couple of lines in that tape that were absolutely incredible. He said the saddest thing when he's officiating at a funeral is not the death of the body, but the death of all the dreams. It's that house you were going to build and never built. Maybe that car you were going to get, never got. The trip you were going to take and never took. The business you were going to start and build, but never did. Well, the saddest thing is not the death of the body, but it is the death of all the dreams. We've got to do what's inside of us. Let's not go to the grave with the music still in us. Now,
Kaya ako natatawa pag may mga tao nagsasabi, sayang naman ang bata namatay na agad.
Oo.
Diba? Sabay pag namatay naman na matanda, sasabihin, sulit naman eh. Kasi matanda na eh. Hindi nila alam na ang magmamatter talaga doon kung paano ka nabuhay.
Oo.
Matanda kang namatay, yung buong buhay mo naman walang kabuluhan.
Tama.
Diba? Yung namatay ng bata, labuhay naman siya na may kabuluhan.
Oo. Tingnan mo siya, no? Yung naka-invento ng Apple, bata pang namatay yun si Steve Jobs. Pero ang laki na ng impact na niya.
Ay, oo.
Na idulot niya sa...
Pala yun, hindi ko nabalitaan.
Patay na. Tagal na, ho. Tagal nang patay si Steve Jobs.
Ay, hindi si Bill Gates pala.
Bravo. Iba naman yun. Ay, mas matagal yung si Bill Gates kasi kwan yun eh. Alam mo naman.
Hindi nga na siguro yun si Bill Gates. Sabagay panahon na siguro ni Steve Jobs. Pero na lang isipin natin, ano. Pero syempre, pinapaunawa pa rin nila na kailangan alagaan pa rin natin yung katawan natin.
Oo.
Kasi baka nagkaroon ng hindi magandang, di ba?
Cancer, kinamatay na.
Si Steve Jobs.
Cancer sa colon nga ba o yung... Basta sa tiyan.
So, maging pa rin talaga tayo. Health conscious pa rin tayo. Para naman masulit natin kung ano man yung magiging blessing na ibibigay sa atin ng Diyos.
Oo.
I want to suggest now that you really put on your thinking hat. I have a paper here that was written by a gentleman who has since passed away. He was a great Canadian. His name was Dr. Lawrence Rampell. And when I first moved back to Canada from the United States about 8 years ago, Dr. Rampell was sitting right here where Mr. Kabuk, the great photographer, is sitting. This man took more notes than anyone I had ever seen in a seminar. I honestly thought if I could have got a copy of his notes, that I would have probably had a transcript of what I was saying. I made up my mind I'd get to know him after the seminar was over. I wanted to know why he wanted to have all this written. And he introduced himself as Dr. Rampell. I asked him if he was a medical doctor. He said no. And I said, are you a dentist? He said no. And I said, are you a chiropractor? He said no. I said, you want to play 20 questions? And he laughed. And he said no, he had a doctorate's degree in thinking.
Meron pala yan, no?
No, he had the only doctorate's degree in thinking that had ever, up till that time, come out of the University of Toronto.
Grabe.
Sino kaya naka-ibento ng ganung kwan? Siya?
Hindi.
Usap niya? O may mas...
Hindi, nag-aral nga. Siya nga, naging doctorate nga. Siya ko na ng doctorate.
Oo, siya yung
Walang-
nag-doctorate ng ganun.
Walang ibang ganun, siya lang.
Oo.
Kaya pinagtatawanan siya dyan eh.
It took him 11 years to get it. Every time he went to go down a road, somebody put a block up in front of him and say, no one has a doctorate degree in thinking. That's rather odd, especially when you consider that thinking is the highest function of which a human being is capable.
Grabe.
All the great leaders, all down through history, have been in complete and unanimous agreement that you and I become what we think about. Play with that for a moment. It's a subject that is not taught in school. It's the highest function of which we're capable. And every great leader that has ever lived all told us that you and I become what we think about most of the time. Dr. Rampel wrote a paper, Tools for Teaching Thinking. He said thinking is a skill which can be learned just as we learn skills such as typing and playing the piano.
May skills pala yun.
These schools offer courses devoted to express.
Di lang siya basta yung kagaya ng mga passive na pagkain.
Oo.
Kailangan mo talaga siya i-develop.
Pag sinabi ka ng skills, dine-develop, minamaster yan eh.
Yun.
Parang pag-gym, pag gusto mo lumaki muscle mo, mag-gym ka, mag-exercise ka, ganoon din yung pag-iisip. Kasi habang lumalawak ang isip mo, dun yung mayabong yung pag-asenso mo eh. Sa lahat ng aspeto ng kung ano lang gusto mong i-improve sa sarili mo o kaya sa sa environment mo.
Kailangan isipin mo ng isipin.
Oo. Kasi hindi hinahasa eh. Hindi tinuturo sa atin eh. Tingnan mo isipin mo na lang. Kapag nahihirapan tayo, halimbawa sa pagbebenta, kapag nahihirapan tayong magbenta, wala tayong benta, ang tanging naisip natin matumal.
Oo.
Diba? Kasi yun lang ang kaya nating isipin eh. Pero pagka sa mga matatalinong tao na nag-iisip mo yan, sasabihin, wala matumal. Tamad ka. Sasabihin sa'yo, di ba sakit yun, di ba?
Oo, masakit yun.
Tapos sasabihin pa sa'yo, hindi ka kasi nag-iisip. Sasaktan kayo, no? Pero totoo pala yun, kung tatanggapin mo, totoo yun.
Oo, totoo yun. Ngayon, kung tatanggapin mo yun, mas makakabuti sa'yo yun. Sa totoo lang.
Oo. Ako tayo nag-iisip ng ganun eh. Lagi ko sinasabi ka. Matumal po ako. Wala pa nang matumal, talagang tamad ka. Ayaw mo gawin ng paraan gamit ang isip mo. Kasi kung pagaganahin mo ng gusto ang isip mo, hindi mag-e-exist yung tumal. Nag-e-exist yung tumal kasi yun ang iniisip mo. Kaya napaganda, ma-develop natin yung skills ng pag-iisip para magamit natin ang gusto doon sa kapaki-pakinabang na bagay. Na yung mga dating hindi natin naiisip na, kung dagdagan ko wala yung customer ko.
Dagdagan ko kaya ng hard work.
Oo. Halimbawa, kada linggo, mag-goal tayo na kailangan may sulo tayong 5 katao bago. Oo. Di ba? Hindi ko sa paraan ng maubusan ng suki. Kasi tayo,
kailangan magkaroon tayo ng bagong pamamaraan.
yun. At magagawa mo yun sa pamamagitan ng pag-iisip.
Yun.
Doon nag-uumpisa lahat.
To teaching thinking. Rather, we are expected to learn and teach thinking as a byproduct of learning mathematics, reading, science, history, trade, and so forth. And he said we do, in fact, learn a lot about thinking in this way. The trouble is we learn our thinking skills in bits and pieces, and we never put it together as an overall picture. If asked to describe what all is required in order to think effectively, most people would be at a loss to give a complete account. Thus, we are unable to assess our own thinking skills or systematically teach the skill of thinking to others. Now, consider this for a moment. When you think in pictures. Check it out. I want to suggest that you think of the home you live in, and as you do, realize that an image of your home comes onto the screen of your mind. It's almost as if there's a screen running right through the center of our head. And the second we think of our home, the picture of the home comes onto the screen of our mind. Now I want to suggest that you think of your automobile. And the second you think of your automobile, the picture of the home is gone and the picture of the automobile is there. Think of your kitchen, your backyard. Think of where you work or go to school. And bang, 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 just like that, the picture changes. we literally think in pictures. Now I'm going to suggest that you think of your mind. Now, when most people think of their mind, they get an image of the brain.
Yo.
How many thought of the brain?
Lahat. Oh,
Quite a few hands going up. And yet, you know, the brain is not the mind any more than the fingernail is. And paradoxically, the fingernail and the brain is the mind. You see, mind is an activity and body is the manifestation of that activity. And we're going to find out as we go along through the morning and this afternoon that the body is really nothing but an instrument of the mind. Now, your brain is comprised of hundreds of thousands of cells. Into these cells, we impregnate pictures or images. And as we think, we activate that particular group of brain cells, and the picture that's in them flashes on the screen of the mind. Now, I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Flip over onto page 5 in your exercise book. At the top of the page, it's talking about me and money. Now, when you think of yourself and you think of money, what kind of a picture do you get? Do you know the vast majority of people get a picture of poverty?
Yeah.
What we want to do is take and build cells of recognition in your brain for prosperity.
Yun.
So we're talking about me and money. That's you and your money. Now we say the program was written in the sincere hope that it would lead you. And that's all we could do is lead you. It's like Dr. Billy B. Sharp in Chicago. He said a person will not believe something until they discover it for themselves. So we just actually want to lead you to this new awareness. We want to lead you to the many discoveries that lie within you. And we're going to do that through the repetition of prosperous ideas. What we're going to do is tell you one thing 10,000 times and 10,000 different ways. And we're going to cause pictures to fly on the screen of your mind until you get a clear picture of greatness and prosperity locked up within you, because that's what they're, regardless of whether you understand that or not at this point. Now, we're suggesting that you start to see money. Whenever you think of money, see this stuff as an obedient, diligent servant. You're the master, it's the servant. And don't ever get that equation reversed, or you're going to find yourself in very, very deep trouble. Your own physical presence. If you and I had no money, we'd still be able to provide service, but the service that we provided would be confined to our physical presence at any given place or any given time. However, if we had some money, we could provide that service far beyond our own physical presence. So let's make certain that we get that programmed into those cells properly. Now you come down a little further. We're going to say here that lack and limitation can only exist when we make room for them in our mind. But prosperity consciousness knows no lack and it knows no limitation. Now, I would suggest that you resolve to just complete.
Konektado din talaga sa ano ni Myro.
Kasi nga, law and principle ang pinag-uusapan dyan. Yun nga sinasabi na yung law, hindi talaga nagbabago yan.
Yun ang katotohanan.
Same principle o katotohanan.
Yun ang katotohanan.
Nasa prosperity or abundance, hindi nag-exist doon ang lack. Maliban na pairali ng isip mo. Ngayon, yung mga nauna nating podcast, sinabi na din natin doon no? Kung saan nagagaling yung lack ko, kung saan nagagaling isip.
Sa demonyo pa rin.
Kaya tingnan mo, ito pinag-uusapan ni nakafocus sila sa prosperity.
Huwag mo isipin yung kakulangan.
Oo.
Yun ang gustong ni Myron. Ay, ni Bob Proctor.
Ipinoprogram niya dito unti-unti. Kaya nga binanggit niya dyan 10,000 times kailangan mong pakinggan yung ganitong klase ng idea. Kasi hindi yan papasok ng 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hindi. Hindi yan basta papasok sa subconsciousness natin.
Kasi nga, imagine mo yung mag-aaral nga tayo sa traditional school. Hindi lang naman isang araw tayo pupapasok dyan.
Oo.
Taon din. Kaya napakahirap talagang baguhin kapag halimbawa na program na tayo niyan.
Tama.
Kaya na lang, makapanood ka ng mga ganito.
Oo. Tapos, sinabi niya rin kanina yung
Yung image.
yun, yung image. Sabi niya nung una, pinakita niya na tayo nag-iisip sa pamamagitan ng picture.
Oo.
Kaya nga ang tawag sa tawag sa ano natin, pag-iisip, imagination.
Yun. Image.
Oo, kasi kapag nag-imagine ka o nag-isip ka, image ang lumalabas sa isip natin, di ba?
Oo.
Yung example niya, yung sasakyan, pagka inisip mo, makakaisip ka ng picture ng sasakyan o yung image ng sasakyan. Pero pagdating sa isip, pag inisip mo yung ano itsura ng isip mo, wala kang maisip.
Wala nga eh. Kasi, unang-una, wala talaga tayong isip. Hindi natin maganda.
Yun nga eh. Diba? Yun ang nakakatawa dun eh. Wala nagturo sa atin kung ano itsura ng isip natin.
Oo.
Mga tao kasi na hindi talaga matanggap yun eh. Na wala silang isip eh.
Sabi niya nga, yung naiisip niyo dyan, hindi yan yung isip. Ang naiisip niyo ngayon, yung utak.
Yung utak. At hindi yun yung isip natin.
Oo.
Kaya kapag tayo nang inisip mo na yun yung isip mo, nagkakamali ka.
Oo.
Kasi dito, may concept siya, may idea na para maisip mo kung ano yung isip mo, kailangan mo talaga
Ano
magkaroon ng
image
picture.
ng pag-iisip?
Oo. Kaya tingnan mo, no, si ama, si lolo, para mapatunayang meron siyang gawa, gumawa siya ng image.
Yun.
Diba? Doon pa lang sa atin sa mga ano lang yun namin, sa mga kapatid. Yun lang makakaunawa ko na yung
Yung
pinag-uusapan
mga
namin.
may kagaya ng doktrina sa amin.
Oo.
Oo.
Example lang namin yan. Na kailangan meron ka talagang image
Yun.
para maintindihan mo ng gusto. Kasi tayo nag-iisip sa pamamagitan ng image.
Image.
Take the lid off your marvelous mind. Just blow away. And let the greatness start to flow around in there. Now, flip over to the next page.
Ibig sabihin mo pala hanggat hindi mo nalalaman kung ano or wala kang idea or hindi mo napipicturize or na-imagination kung ano yung itsura ng isip,
Oo.
hindi pa doon talaga, napapatunayan lang doon na hindi mo pa kilala o hindi mo pa alam kung ano yung isip.
Correct.
Paano ka mag-isip
Oo. Ganun mismo yung idea na ano.
na gusto niyang sabihin.
Oo.
Diba? Hanggat hindi mo nabibigyan ng picture yung isip,
Oo. Kung ano yung isip mo,
hindi mo nagagamit yun.
hindi mo nagagamit.
Sabihin, hindi nagmamanifest yun. No?
Galing.
Akala lang talaga, sinasabi namin kayo na mula umpisa na pag nagtapos tayo ng pag-aaral, akala natin, nag-iisip na tayo.
Correct.
Ngayon, tuloy natin to.
When we start thinking about money and we start thinking about ourselves, as I suggested, we get images on the screen of our mind. Now, on page 6, we say throughout your entire Born Rich seminar, your attention is directed at the importance of your mind. The type of thoughts and ideas which occupy your consciousness are of paramount importance in developing prosperity in your life. Your mind is either in an orderly or a confused state. Order must prevail. John mentioned that a little earlier. Order and movement are what necessary. Well, we start with the order. So we say order must prevail in your mind if you ever hope to see it manifest in your material world. Now, you want order in your material world, that means meaningful relationships. That means prosperity and growth in our business. It could mean all kinds of things that are good, but they all have to start in here. Everything starts in our mind. Well, if we're going to have order in our mind, we must have an image of our mind that most people don't have. So,
Sabihin, kapag wala ka pala ng image, no? Ng isip or ng mind, disorder.
Kalituhan.
Oo, kalituhan.
Disorder, ibig sabihin, confusion.
Oo.
Walang pagkakaayos.
Tama. Although nag-iisip ka naman talaga, hindi ka lang maayos.
Oo.
No?
Tsaka, isipin mo, may mga ginagawa ka na may mga gusto kang gawin, hindi mo ginagawa. Bakit?
May disorder sa'yo eh.
Yun, yung order at saka yung movement, hindi magkatugma.
Yun.
Kaya mga gusto mong gawin, hindi mo magawa. Nagtataka ka, bakit ganun? Hindi ko magawa yung gusto kong gawin.
Kaya pala marami rin nagsasabi ng mga ano na, kung ano yung sinasabi mo, gawin mo.
Oo.
Makakabuti sa'yo eh. Kasi nga wala naman taong nagsasalita para mapasama yung sarili niya eh. Diba?
Isang halimbawa na dyan yung mga addict sa bawal na gamot, sa droga. Hindi ako naniniwalang gusto nila yun eh. Sa totoo lang. Hindi ako naniniwalang gusto nila yung magdroga. Ikaw gusto mo siraan yung katawan mo? Di ba?
Oo.
gusto mo magkasakit sa paggamit nun, hindi ka, kasi kapag gumamit ka nun, hindi ka mawala ka ng gana kumain. Tapos yung isip mo laging balisa. Hindi ako naniniwala na gusto nila yun, pero bakit nila nagagawa?
Dahil nga may disorder.
Yun, yung order at saka yung movement, hindi magkatugma.
Bagaman ayaw nila, dahil nga na nasa subconscious nila.
Ngayon, tatanungin kita, ano yung subconscious na banggit mo, diba? Wala kang image doon sa subconscious. Ano yung subconscious? Yung conscious, ano din yun? Wala ka rin image nun eh. Kaya hindi mo maisip eh. Kaya lito ka.
Yun.
Walang order yung isip mo. Diba? Kaya itong ano ni Reprogramming, napakaganda talaga nito.
Sige, tuloy natin para malaman nyo na kung ano ba yung image nung isip natin, yung subconscious at yung conscious.
What we're going to do as we go through the seminar is build brain cells. Now, that may sound a little strange to some of you. You may be sitting there and thinking, well, this is ridiculous. How can I build brain cells sitting watching this box? Well, I can assure you that you can, and I'm going to convince you very shortly that you're able to. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use different examples as we go through this seminar, and each one of these examples are real, live examples, every one of them. This is a letter that I received on February the 18th, 1986. It came from Joanne White. She was the regional administrator to the vice president of sales for the Metropolitan Insurance Company in Kansas City. Now, Joanne was in a seminar there in January of 1986. This letter is dated February of 86. And when Joanne came to the seminar in 1986, she told me a fascinating story. Now, apparently, she had come to a seminar that I conducted in Kansas City 10 years prior to this in 1976. Now, I didn't remember Joanne, nor did I remember her son, who she was telling me the story of. But when she told me what happened, I quickly related to it because it's happened many times, and there's many situations that I do remember. Apparently, we had been doing seminars right across the country for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, and a friend of hers in another area had been talking to her on the phone, who also worked for the same company, and this friend told her, if this seminar ever comes to Kansas City, make sure you go and take your son. Well, she took that person's advice and she came. She brought her 11-year-old son, Eric, who had been diagnosed as having learning disabilities. Now, keep your mind open here, folks, because this is real.
Learning disability. Mabigat yan.
Someone had made a classical error, and someone...
Paano kaya nakukuha yung learning disability?
Hindi ko alam eh.
No?
Kung tutusin, label yun ng mga tao eh.
Oo.
Nililabel ka nila.
As mahina.
Oo, wala kang kakayahang matuto.
Yun.
No?
Pero syempre, dahil nga may mga tao na kagaya ni Bob Proctor, hindi naniniwala sa ganun.
Hindi. Kasi naiintindihan niya kung ano isip.
Yun.
Alam niya kung paano gumagana ang isip ng tao. Kapag ka ikaw naintindihan mo rin yun, hindi mo na rin sasabihin na mayroong learning disability.
Oo, totoo yan.
Diba?
Kaya may learning disability, unang-una, syempre, yun yung nasa environment niya. Diba? Tuloy natin to, maganda to.
possibly in a position of authority, in fact, probably in a position of authority, and they told this lady and her husband that their 11-year-old son had learning disabilities and not to expect too much from him. So they didn't. Worse still, the little boy didn't expect much from himself.
Diba? Pinaniwalaan din ng bata. Kawawa rin yung bata. Sige mismo yung bata, narinig niya yun yung usapan na
Yun na nga
hindi yan matututo kasi mahina ang isip. O kaya na
sabi ko na kaya siya nagkaroon ng ganong ability dahil nasa environment niya nga.
Kung ano yung kinalakihan niya, kung ano yung ginagalawan niya.
Ibig sabihin, yung mga napapakinggan niya, may learning disability din.
Correct. Tama.
Diba?
Oo.
Ang akala ng mga magulang na yung bata ang may learning disability, hindi alam ng mga magulang na sila mismo yung problema.
Oo, yung mismong ginagalawan ng bata. Kasi ang bata para siyang sponge, no?
Yun.
Sinasagat lang niya lang kung ano yung pinararating sa kanya.
Yan, oo. Sige, tuloy natin. Maganda to.
I told her to bring the little boy to the seminar, and we just built new brain cells. That child could do anything you wanted.
Brain cell.
This idea of learning disabilities was an error that someone had made, and they shouldn't believe it any longer. And I said, you bring him, have him sit right near the front, and I said, we'll give him a little special attention, and you'll just watch the change take place. Let me read you the letter. She's, Dear Bob, I wanted to take a moment to tell you how much I had gained from your seminar in Kansas City and how much I am continuing to gain from the use of your tapes. Now, at that time, all we had is audio tapes. Now, you can sit and you can watch
Swerte natin, pero tayo marami.
Video, no?
parts of it that'll seem a little confusing to you first time through. But as you play it over and over,
Yan. Yung sikreto.
confusion will leave and order is going to come to your mind. There's many times I'll take a book and I'll read the same paragraph over and over again
Yan.
that I mentioned earlier of Napoleon Hill's. I've been reading that for 27 years. Now, it's not such a slow learner.
Yan yung sikreto. Kung ano yung gusto mong maabot o gusto mong matutunan, gusto mong makuha, kailangan pa ulit-ulitin mo yun i-replay sa isip mo.
Nakasulat sa Biblia din.
Tama, di ba?
Sa host.
Araw at gabi. Ganun mag-program sa sarili. Kung ano yung gusto mong yun ang ipoprogram mo. Araw-araw, yun ang sasabihin mo sa sarili mo. Yun ang mga papanoorin mong programa. Yun ang mga pakikinggan mong salita. Kasi yun ang magiging ikaw.
Yun.
Yun ang magiging program mo.
Yun, totoo yun. Kung ano yung gusto mong maging sa loob ng 5 taon mula ngayon,
Oo.
yun ang dapat na i-consume mo.
Araw-araw.
Araw-araw yun, ha?
Yung si kay Bob Proctor, ang in-example niya, sinulat niya sa goal card, yun ang binabasa niya araw-araw.
Oo. Eh,
Bukod
kakasabi
sa-
niya nga lang,
Oo.
yung libro ni Napoleon Hill, 27 years.
Araw-araw niyang binabasa. Ganun mag-program, no? Kaya kung ikaw nanonood ka ngayon nito, napapanood mo to, pwede mong panoorin to paulit-ulit.
Oo.
Hindi mo kasi maintindihan to ng isang panoorin.
Hindi mo maiintindihan. Kahit Tagalog yung sinasabi na,
Oo.
hindi mo maiintindihan, hindi nyo ma-adapt ka agad.
Oo, ng isang beses lang. Lalo na kung ang pagkakaprogram sa atin, napakatagal na panahon.
Oo.
Kaya ako, simula nung malaman ko yung ganyang idea, araw-araw tong seminar na to, siguro hindi lang yata 1,000 beses ko na napanood to. Kapag pupunta akong tipas, nakasaksak talaga sa piniplay ko yan ng gusto. Lagi. Kasi wala naman akong gagawin pagka nagdadrive ako, papuntang tipas, ilan yun? 30 minutes din yun. Di makaka 30 minutes akong pakikinig. Ngayon, araw-araw, sa pag may na-experience akong ibang bagay, naalala ko yung sinasabi ni Bob Proctor, o kaya ni Myron, o kaya ng Biblia, na yun pala yung ibig sabihin. Kasi hindi mo maintindihan yung isang...
Hanggat hindi mo naranasan.
Oo, hindi mo talaga maintindihan hanggat di mo nararanasan. Pero sa oras na maranasan mo, yan pala yung ibig sabihin ng talata na yan, o kaya na sinabi nila na gano'n.
Galing.
It's just there's so much depth in the book. My wife's sitting back there and she said, no, it's not the depth, it's that you're slow learners. But anyway, that's just her opinion. All right.
Naalala ko tuloy yung joke eh.
Yeah. Nino.
Sabi, kapag sa mahirap, mayaman daw, ang tawag, slow learner. Pag sa mahirap, tawag bobo. Di ba?
Oo.
Tuloy natin to. Natawa lang ako, naalala ko yung ganun.
Now, she said, I listen to the tapes each time I get in my car.
Yeah.
I intend to continue to do so. And of course, you've got the audio cassettes from the seminar as well, so you can just snap them into your car. Remember this, if you only drive 25,000 miles a year, you're spending 13 40-hour weeks behind the wheel of that automobile, all of which your conscious mind is free to travel around and do what it wants to do. Your body is programmed to drive the car. Well, Bob, I'm sure at times you ponder over the long-range effects of these seminars. Do you merely get people excited and then once you leave town, forget it? Well, I attended your seminar when you were in Kansas City 10 years ago. I brought my 11-year-old son who was going through some trying times in school. He had been diagnosed as having learning disabilities and he was really struggling. Listen to this. He was certain he was a reject. What a terrible thought to be running around in a kid's mind. I'm a reject. Many adults running around with that thought in their mind. You could have been sitting with that thought in your mind. You might be sitting with that thought in your mind. I'm a reject. There's no such thing as rejects. God didn't make any rejects.
Tawag,
Brother,
ganda rin, you know. Walang ginawang reject ang Diyos.
Totoo yan.
Lahat ng ginawa niya, karangis niya eh.
May natatawa na naman tuloy ako doon sa joke. Naalala ko pag mukha yan eh.
Alin? Tukol sa reject.
Oo. Ginawa yun Diyos eh. Sabi nung anghel, may ginawa, magaganda, gwapo.
Tapos
Sabi nung anghel, Lord, paano po to? Medyo sira. Sabi ng Diyos eh, lagyan mo na ng sense of humor. Purahin mo. Ibig sabihin, wala pa rin reject. Diba?
Kompleto eh, no?
Ito.
Nasa tao na yung nag-iisip ng reject.
Oo, totoo yan.
right to the seminars, he learned that you can do anything or be anything that you believe you can. He learned to set goals and to achieve the goals that he set. Listen to this for progress. I am very proud to tell you there was both an immediate and a long-range change in Eric's performance. In that same school year, his grade spiraled upwards and he became an honor student. Eric attended Bay State. He is an Eagle Scout. He was listed in Who's Who in American high schools. He was editor of his school paper. He qualified for scholarships. That's plural. He had his choice for college. Now, at the present time, he's a junior at the University of Missouri, and he's on the dean's list. I feel a great deal of this can be credited to the fact that this 11-year-old boy learned he could do anything he believed he could, and he became a goal setter.
No, kaya wag kang may mga tao na masyadong nagiging maliit yung tingin nila sa sarili nila kasi dahil din sa environment.
Oo.
Dahil sa mga tao na nakapaligid sa kanila na, hindi, kagaya niyan.
Ililabel ka nila na ikaw,
Hindi mo kaya yan.
Oo.
Maganunin ka.
Ikaw ngayon, kung wala kang idea na paniniwalaan mo yung tao na yan.
Paniniwalaan mo na lang.
Dito, pinatutunayan dito, no? Na yung idea na itinuturo o kapag ka naunawa mo yung idea na to at in-apply mo, yan, bata nga na nililabel na nililabel nila na
may
learning disability. Pero nung maturuan ng ganitong klase ng idea, naging dean's lister.
May dalawa pang scholarship.
Oo. Kaya nga, kung napapanood to ng mga may anak ngayon, no? Hindi lang naman to pang matanda eh.
Totoo yan.
Panbata pa na ito talaga eh. Kasi yung mga bata mas mabilis silang matuto. Oo. Mas kailangan nila to kung iniisip mo na yung anak mo makulit, di sumusunod sa'yo, at pasaray. Sabihin mo papanoorin ng mga ganito. Lalo na yung mga 3 years old na 2 years old, pinababayaan ng
bata, ito na yung nakaprogram sa kanila.
Pinababayaan lang ng mga magulang manood ng kung ano-ano mga cartoons sa mga. Ngayon alam ko ano pinanonood ng mga
yan. Magtataka yung mga magulang, ba't ang tigas ng ulo ng anak ko?
Oo. Kasi mga pinapanood nila, puro mga wala namang katuturan.
Totoo.
Pinaprogram mo yung anak mo nang hindi mo alam yung mga programa na yun. Hindi naman makakatulong sa progreso niya para matuto siya sa buhay.
Ang may kasalanan, sila pa rin.
Tama.
Diba?
Kasi hindi rin alam ng magulang. Diba? Kaya, kung walang ganitong klase ng edukasyon ng magulang, sumatotal yung anak niya. Ganun din ang magiging
At yung magiging anak mo.
Oo.
Diba? Kaya nga kung yung mga nakakapanood nito at nagustuhan nyo yung ganitong mga ideya, mga palabas, pwede nyo i-share. No? Hindi yung sasarilinin na kayo lang yung magiging kayo lang yung magkakaroon ng development.
Oo. Lalo na rin may mga anak kayo, mga bata, 1 year old, 2 years old. Ganitong mga content ang ipapanood ninyo. Kasi, naku, grabe. Kahit kayo mismo hindi kayo makapaniwala kapag ganitong mga klase ng katuturang mga video yung pinanood nila kaysa yung mga vlogger na mga garbage na ng content.
O yung mga,
diba?
Ano yung pinapakain ng mga content creator sa mga anak.
Oo.
Kung ano-anong basura.
Kaya mga anak niya, tututo magmura,
Yo.
tututong bastusin ng magulang. Kasi yun ang mga content eh.
Oo.
Diba? Pero kung ganitong content, pati sa school na mag-i-excel ng gusto yung mga anak niya.
Sigurado.
Joanne concluded by saying, Bob, I just want to share this letter with you, as I really do not know if we would be able to tell this success story if I had not brought Eric to this seminar. I'll always be grateful. I guess she will. And I guess Eric will too. And what was the big win? Was it the who's who in American high schools? Was it being editor of his school paper? Was it the honors that he accomplished that first year? Was it the college scholarships in college? I don't think so. I don't think any of those things were the big win. You know what the big win was? It was the one single idea that enabled him to do all these things. And one idea can cause you to make the progress this young boy made. We have a gentleman in our audience. I'm not quite sure where he is. He's a good friend of mine, Grant Sylvester. He's the president of Money Concepts for Canada. And Grant Sylvester hired us to conduct these seminars way back in the 70s for a large company that he was a senior executive in. And right across the country, they had a 53% increase in sales. Now, that's hundreds of people. That's an enormous increase. I want you to think about that for a moment. Here's an idea that give this little boy honors in schools, gave Grant's company a 50% increase in sales. So you see, I don't...
Yung sinasabi mo na hindi lang din talaga pang bata.
Oo.
Pati mga pang empleyado. No? Mga matatanda na. Kasi baka may mga magsasabi yan, matanda na kami, baka hindi na para sa amin yan.
Oo.
Bigyan na lang namin sa mga anak namin yan.
Hindi. Kailangan nga mas maging kayong modelo ng mga anak eh. Kahit pa 80 years old na kayo, narinig nyo to. Hindi, hanggat humihinga kayo at hanggat buhay kayo, pwede sa inyo to.
Totoo yan.
Di ba? Di mo alam kung saan ka pa mag-buhay, di may 20 years ka pang sinayang.
Yun.
Di mo alam.
Yun. Kasi marami nagsasabi, di ba?
Oo.
Tanda na ako eh. 60 na ako eh.
Oo.
Bakit? Malay mo, 40 years, 100 taon ka pa bago mamatay.
Hindi may 40 years ka pa.
Di ba? Sa 40 years na yun, kahit nga mga 10 taon lang eh.
Oo. Si Bob Proctor, isipin nyo, 1 year lang, grabe yung result na. At hindi lang si Bob Proctor nakikita ko ng mga ganyan, marami. Hindi lang 1 year, 6 months, 3 months, nakikita nila yung grabe yung result. Kaya hindi ubra yung 1 taon. Hindi dito yung oras eh.
Oh, hindi naman.
Depende dito sa galing ng pag-iisip na may mumulat sa'yo. At kung paano ma-execute yung idea na to. Yun.
Really care what you do. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It's you that counts. And the more you understand you, the better your results you're going to get.
Di ba?
I'm going to run through a very quick idea, and it's very simple. Don't let the simplicity of this idea deceive you. What we're going to do is run through a concept and explain just how brain cells are built. I'm going to ask someone from the audience, Nino, you're a good friend, come up to find your mom. Nino was kind enough to hire my son and daughter-in-law to go to work for them at the beginning of this year, and every month this year, they have earned somewhere between $20,000 and $45,000 a month. Now, you don't do that if you haven't got a real...
Malaki na lang yan, di ba?
Instead of it. And that is the development of people. It's not the direction of things. So, Nino's a very good friend of mine. Now, I'll ask you a couple of questions.
So, utis pa yan.
What I'd like you to do is hold out your hand like this. All right? Now, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Now, I would like you to look at that. I want you to see what that is. I don't want anybody to say anything. I'm going to put it in Nino's hand. You just close your eyes, Nino. I'm going to put this in your hand, and I want you to feel it. Close your hand and feel it. Now, Nino, tell me what that is.
It feels like a piece of metal.
Well, move your fingers around it and tell me what kind of a metal. What would you use that for?
I would imagine to open the door.
To open a door. What do you call this? A metal opens a door.
Ito na naman tayo eh. Buti hindi niya sinabi yan. Gusto mo, maglaro na naman tayo ng 20 pesos. Yan mga matatalinong tao no?
Oo.
Ang sagot, pahimay eh.
Hey, Keith, this goes to Reprogramming. Any boy, I'm telling you. I'll take it away. You guessed it right, You win one of our cassette tapes. That is a key. All right? Now, what happened there? Let's stop and think what happened.
Diyan nalalabas explain niya na yung about sa sa ito rin natin. Maganda to.
Nino has sensory factors. He can hear, see, smell, taste, and touch.
Yeah.
And when your sensory factor touch comes in contact with something, a light message is sent through a nerve passageway in your body. It strikes a group.
Yan na, unti-unti niya nang hinihimay sa atin kung paano ba nangyayari.
Oo.
Yung gumagana yung isip natin. Di ba?
Brain cell yan eh. Yung tawag nila dyan, brain cell.
Brain cells.
The cells in your brain, those brain cells are activated and the picture that's in the cells flash on the screen of the mind. So although Nino was not looking at this, which is a sensory factor, and it'll work that way too, he was touching the key and that triggered the image on the screen of his mind. Now what I'm going to do, I am going to show something to Nino and I'm going to ask him what it is. Nino, I would like you to tell me what that is.
You pinned.
A what?
Pin.
A pen. You think it is. You don't know what it is, do you? You're guessing now, aren't you? Now, you weren't guessing when you told me what that is. But when I asked you what this little metal object was, you were guessing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, Nino, what you're really saying is, I had cells of recognition when I touched this, but when I look at this, I have no cells of recognition.
Magkaiba yun, oh. Di ba? Ibig sabihin, kapag alam mo na yung bagay, naka-record na sa utak mo, naka-program na,
Automatic mong malalaman. Sa oras na ma-contact mo yun, ma-encounter mo, automatic biglang na sa
guys,
isip mo.
yung image ng isip natin, wala talaga eh.
Oo. Yun nga yun ang pinupunto niya dyan eh.
Yun ang pinupunta niya dyan.
Kaya lang, kung tatanong ng isip natin, di mo maisip, di mo ma-imagine. Di mo ma-imagine ang brain cell mo. Di ba?
Kaya, excited to guys. Malalaman na natin.
Now, we're going to build cells of recognition in your brain. I'm going to tell you what this is, and I'm going to do something with it, and as I do that, instantly, in a millisecond, cells will be built in your brain. That, Nino, has a little plunger on it. Now, as I hit that plunger, something's going to come out of here. You see that? That is a toothpick, Nino. That's what your Aunt Marg gives you when you don't need anything, all right? Now, all right, now that is a toothpick. Now, that's no big deal, and you could miss the whole message here. But you see, Nino didn't know what that is. Do you know what he was saying? I don't have any cells of recognition in my brain. Now, when you go home, Nino, you can tell Rose that you built some brain cells this morning. She can love more of you. All right, you take more of her home. But that's exactly what that is. All right? And we just built some brain cells.
Yun.
Thank you.
Merong merong pagbabago na sa brain cell.
Oo, kasi naintindihan mo na yun. Nalaman mo na yun eh.
Nadagdagan
Ng brain cell mo. Ngayon, yung kanina pa nating sinasabi, yung isip, ano itsura, wala pa tayo nung ka-brain.
Wala pa. Kaya abangan nyo. Ito tayo guys.
Thank you, Nino. Ninos Brazzeri is, without question, one of the greatest real estate sales managers I've ever met. And you know, I told Ryan something, and I'm going to tell you something. Whenever you go to do something, make certain that the people you surround yourself with are very successful. Carl Menninger one point in time pointed out that environment is more important than heredity. In other words, the people you find yourself surrounded by are more important to your success, your well-being, than what's built right into your genes at birth.
Kaya lagi sinasabi sa atin ni Amay na huwag kayong makikisalamuha sa sanlibutan.
Oo, hindi naman literal na kakausapin mo yung tao na hindi mo kilala. Hindi gawin yun.
Oo.
Yung makikipagkaibigan ka, makipagpalitan ka sa kanya ng idea, matatanggapin mo yung mga salita niya. Yun yung sinasabi ng Diyos na huwag mo tatanggapin yung salita ng sanglibutan. Kasi papasok yun sa brain cell mo eh.
Totoo yan.
Hindi mo alam papasok yun sa'yo. Na parang binhi yun na
Yun eh.
may tatanim sa'yo.
Ayaw at sa hindi. Ayaw mo at sa hindi.
Naman, tama. Kasi unang-una kung nakikisalamuha ka nga kasi yung salitang salamuha, tinatanggap mo yung idea nila. Kapag ka, saan linaw, pagka inaya ka, sama ka. Di ba? So, ibig sabihin, yung isip mo, tsaka yung movement, hindi order, disorder.
Oo.
Kaya nalilito ka. Ngayon, kapag ka sinabihan ka ng gano'n na nakikisalamuha ka sa sanlibutan, nasasaktan ka.
Oo.
Di ba? Kasi kahit ako noon, gano'n eh. Yung pala,
Sa pag-aakala mo na hindi
oo.
naman masama yun
Oo.
Diba? Sa isip mo, ikaw, hindi ka naman gumagawa ng masama. Kaya lang yung kinakasama mo, yung mga nakakasama mo,
Yun ang masasama.
yun ang pwede magtanim sa'yo.
At hindi mo namamalayan, pwede ka nung idamay sa kung anong meron sila.
Maging kagaya ka rin.
Oo.
Kaya magaling yung mga payo nila na piliin natin kung sino yung magiging nasa paligid natin.
And I suggested I go see Nino. I told Leslie, go see Nino. Go to work for the man and listen to him and do what he tells you. And he'll draw the best out of you. And that's exactly what he's doing. Now, we're going to build some brain cells with respect to the mind.
Yan na.
All right? And as we build these brain cells with respect to the mind, we're going to build a picture of our mind right in here. And then as we get that picture in here, we can start making headway at making some of the adjustments that John talked about in the proper use of the program. The points we just covered were simple, but vitally important. And one of the most important points of all was the fact that you and I must have an image of our mind. Without an image, we have confusion.
Yan na yun, lagi natin sinasabi. Kailangan talaga malaman natin what image ng mind natin. Para mawalan tayo ng confusion pagkalito.
So that's very, very important. We're talking about building brain cells and developing an image and placing it in these cells for our mind. So what we will have then are cells of recognition. When we think of our mind, rather than drawing a blank or drawing on a picture of the brain, we actually have a workable image that we can start to use. Now, before we do that, let me mention something here about a gentleman I heard speak way back in the early 70s. I was fortunate enough to be on a program in Chicago at a Human Resource Congress with a gentleman named Frank Goebel. Frank Goebel had been an aerospace engineer. He was a president of an aerospace company. And one day he was working on his budget, and he realized that 65 cents out of every dollar revenue coming into that company was going back out of the company again to employees for either salaries or benefits. And he suddenly realized he knew virtually nothing about people. Here he was spending 65% of all the revenue on something he knew virtually nothing about. He said, I knew an awful lot about engineering, and I knew a fair amount about aerospace, but I knew very little about people. And so he said that he decided he would study some psychology, and fortunately for him, he ended up collaborating with Abraham Maslow. Now, Maslow made a breakthrough, the like of which is maybe only made every few thousand years. He had come to the conclusion that you and I have infinite potential. He's written a paper. He left aerospace engineering, and he went on to start the Thomas Jefferson Research Center out in Pasadena. In a paper called The Productive Person, Goebel wrote, by nature, you and I are alike. By practice, we get wide apart. There's the difference in our results again. Now, he said the difference between the most dissimilar characters, between the real achievers and the non-achievers, for example, seems to arise not so much from nature as from habit, custom, and education. He went on to quote William James, who concluded that we use a very small part of our real potential. And James said that most people live, whether physically, intellectually, or morally, in a very restricted circle of our potential being. We make use of a very small portion of our possible consciousness and of our soul's resources in general. Much like the person who out of their entire bodily organism would get into the habit of using and moving only their little finger.
Ganun lang kalit yung potential na nagagamit ng tao.
Had a child, And that child was laying perfectly still in its crib, and the only part of its body it was ever able to move was its little finger. I'm quite certain that you would probably beg, you would borrow, and if you had to, you would steal to find out what's wrong with that child. But isn't it strange that a human being can stop growing mentally at a very early age, and it can be virtually ignored? This is, without question, one of the most important subjects we can go to. I want to refer back to something Napoleon Hill wrote again that caught my attention when I first read the book. He pointed out in here, somewhere in your makeup, there lies sleeping the seed of achievement,
See the
which, if aroused and put into action, will carry you to heights such as you may have never hoped to attain. Do you know, as I think of this and as I read it now, I'm doing things today that 27 years ago, if anyone had suggested, I would have thought they were hallucinating. I take a look at my paycheck today. It's so completely different than it was when I first started to study this. In fact, the same people that used to pay me $4,000 a year are now paying me $4,000 an hour. Now,
Grabe.
the only thing that's really changed
Grabe.
is what's going on inside. Everything was already there. It's just a matter of learning how to use it.